My Pokemon adventure was interrupted by a game that came out during the week. Do you know what game that was?
No games came out last week. It was the quietest week in all of the release schedule, Chaz.
What are you talking about? The greatest game ever created and put onto any console was released. Of course, we're talking about Elden Ring, the game that's kind of been the talk of the video game world for the last little bit. So yeah, I mean, I bought it on day one and played it a tiny bit. Have you gotten to try it out anything, or were you interested at all in anything about it?
I mean, going into it, I wasn't, overly, hyped about it or anything. I've never played any of the Dark Souls games. I mean, I've kind of watched them in passing, and I don't know, the kind of dark fantasy theme to me wasn't really grabbing me, but I mean, it looked, at least, at a high level, like a pretty interesting, polished game, especially with all the reviews. That would be the definitely the point that was kind of being stressed. So, I mean, I had interest in that regard, but no, I have not tried to actually get my hand on a copy or anything just yet.
Yeah. Well, for me, this was actually my first experience with a Souls-like game. I just, I don't know. I didn't really like the aesthetic. I didn't really like how difficult it sounded like some of these games were, especially when they first started. And that's kind of, rode along all the way up until now. But for me personally, I kind of was tantalized into kind of jumping into this one because, one, I really liked fantasy and fantasy, themed games or television or movies. So that was kind of one thing. And then something we will definitely talk about is a couple of the previous reviews I heard, I had listened to, they gave the impression to me that the game, we've kind of talked about it, they didn't say the game was totally accessible. They've said it was more accessible, which maybe I kind of took that and ran with it a little bit too far because, man, I've played up until this point, not much. I've played maybe 2 hours, and the 2 hours was pretty brutal. Like, I was kind of getting knocked all around the place, and I don't know, it was kind of jarring for a first experience of a franchise, and it kind of pushed me back into Pokemon for a little bit. But,
Well,
or go
so
ahead.
question. I didn't watch your whole stream. I mean, I kind of popped in a bits and
Mm-hmm.
pieces when I saw you were trying to test it out. I saw you get slammed towards the end with
Yeah.
that bridge boss or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
did you do any kind of like exploration in the area? Or did you kind of feel like you just went from like point A to point B kind of style play?
I was gonna mention that. I feel like I went and did the very first campaign-oriented story mode-based mission.
Hmm.
So I figured like normally I would probably start exploring first, but I was just like, and when you first opening a game, you want to play like a certain amount of story-based stuff just to kind of
Hmm.
get I don't know, kind of get enthralled, kind of surround yourself into what's going on with the story. Actually, this B-roll right here is showing the guy.
Yeah, I see.
But yeah, like, just like I said, I kind of wanted to venture a little bit before going and exploring,
Hmm.
but no, man, this guy's like the first big boss I'd faced, and I even had help from whatever like AI companion or whatever, and it was not fun. But I have a feeling you're supposed to probably go out and adventure and do other things, but I didn't feel like the game explained to me how leveling up or how exploring benefits you or
Right.
makes you stronger anyways.
Well, it's
Like,
a tricky thing. I have not played any of the Souls-like games, so I'm not sure if maybe some of that, the way they kind of, aren't real clear with, how certain systems work and whatnot, if that's just kind of a standard for the series, or if that's something new in, Elden Ring specifically. So it's hard for me to give, like a real educated opinion on it. But I mean, from my understanding, at least from listening to the reviews, because I mean, I like kind of seeing what everybody's feelings were. And for those who were praising the game, but clouding it as being a more accessible title. Most of them were saying it's accessible if you choose for it to be accessible. Like if you want, you can have that same regular Dark Souls experience you've always had, which kind of seems like the route you were kind of falling into, even if it was unintentionally. Just if you just work through the game at a normal pace without doing a whole lot of exploration, then you're still going to run into those crazy hard Dark Souls bosses that you've always run into. But
mm-hmm.
if you take it as a chance to say, okay, well, I'm going to take a step back, go a different route, explore, kind of over level yourself a little bit, then it opens up a path for accessibility. So that's what you were kind of, I think, alluding to earlier when we I know we kind of chatted back and forth outside of the stream, but
Hmm.
basically just talking about the difference between something just being straight up accessible versus being more accessible than the other iterations in this particular, Souls-like genre.
Yeah, and once again, a big problem with me is, as you were saying, like, a big problem with me is that the game, I think the game wholly depends on your previous experiences with the franchise, as you said. There's really not that much explanation as to how do you do anything. Like, I've said it, but like, the parrying system, I have a feeling that's probably the most important aspect of battling within the game and the combat. And I feel like all it did is there's a short little section in a cave where it's just like, this is parry, press this trigger, and like that was it. It doesn't explain like the timing. It doesn't explain that different enemies have different, like, or you have to parry them in different ways. It just says,
Mhm.
this is parry. And then yeah, again, back to the leveling up, like you go into your numbers and there's just like, fantasy or role playing based things that are like stamina, strength, and all that stuff. But it's like, how do you level up any of that stuff? Is it that stuff that you drop whenever you die? Is that the importance of going back and picking up that thing that
Mhm.
it takes your place when you die? I'm assuming that's the case. And then if that is the case, you die so frequently. I mean, that just seemed it annoyed the heck out of me knowing that I'd have to, every time I died, which is a game solely based on dying pretty much. Like, it kind of frustrated me at first just to know, okay, I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get you. I mean, I can understand certainly your frustration if you feel like, a certain game mechanic isn't explained well to you. I guess the question that's kind of raised is just in general is, the question of difficulty in a game. Like, should a game be this hard? What's making it this hard? And you probably have different feelings on it than maybe I will, but I think there's different kind of ways that, a game is difficult. Like, there are definitely like the difficulty mechanics coming from like boss encounters that are clearly designed to be challenging,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have difficulty that I think maybe is intentional, but maybe at the same time isn't, like things like really kind of obtuse menus and hidden features or unexplained mechanics. Like, that adds a level of difficulty, even though it's not like a direct gameplay mechanic. Just that lack of information makes everything else more difficult.
Well,
So
oh, I was just gonna say, like you were saying, I 100%, like, I don't feel like it's difficult unintentionally. I do feel like there is intent and there is ways of probably getting about that. I just like, I don't, I just didn't, from what I had played, I just didn't necessarily like how it went about its like difficulty. Like I had
mhm.
mentioned, or I had mentioned to you off chat about how, like, about animations, block, like literally, if you want to heal yourself, you like healing your, like, you can't just back out of healing yourself or attacking. Like, once you hit a button, the animation follows through, and there's no like backing out, and you get like left wide open for like so
Yeah,
many.
I think part of that though might be, as you were saying, it's a deliberate thing, like the way those mechanics play out and like how those animations, kind of,
Mm-hmm. It's
roll into one
100%
another.
deliberate. Oh yeah, I agree with you.
Right. So it's part of the style of play that you're supposed to learn and evolve from. And that's why I think, I would imagine the core following these kind of games, they enjoy that because it's a learning experience. They learn the systems, the flow of things, and they figure out the boss encounters. And there's a, feeling of achievement and success when they, master that particular combat skill and is able to take down a certain boss or,
Mm-hmm.
activity in the game. So I know you had mentioned that you felt like this game probably should have had other difficulty modes, and I've heard some people drop that suggestion as well. I mean, do you still feel that way, or do you feel like the game should be fine as it is?
I I mean, kind of thinking about it, I feel like in a way it should, I would think that would be excusable if the game did a better job of explaining things. Once
Mhm.
again, like, there's really not that much of a tutorial. There's one basic part when the game first starts where it says jump down into this hole, and you jump down in this hole and you face like five enemies, and they're like kind of just basic, fodder enemies. They're not like bosses or nothing. Like like most games, whenever you enter a tutorial level, it'll throw you up against like either multiple enemies or one big boss, like a big entry level boss.
Mhm.
And as the enemy, attacks you, it'll say, okay, press this to do this or press this to do that, and like I don't know. I felt like I just didn't feel like it. Maybe I already forget. Maybe it did do that, but for whatever reason, for me, it just none of it really stuck. I don't know.
Hmm. I don't know. It's as I haven't played it and I didn't watch your stream enough to I think have a good
Mm-hmm.
perspective on it. Because I could agree. Like, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for having a game that isn't going to hold your hand the entire time. I think too many open world games do that, and it takes a lot of the player agency away, and they don't. I mean, when you feel like you're being led by the nose through an entire game, that definitely takes some of the excitement of exploring and discovering things out. But at the same time, if they're not explaining core systems of the game that you're going to need to utilize, during combat and exploration, then that, I mean, it may still be a deliberate design choice, but I guess you could argue that that's more of a, I don't know, I don't want to say objectively poor design choice because I
Mm-hmm.
mean objectively is hard to qualify, but might be something that may not appeal well to a vast majority of people. In general, though, like I don't know, I've heard that suggestion of we should just have an easy mode dropped in it, and I just inherently don't agree with that. Like
I don't think
when a
I don't think a developer should be made to do that though. I feel like if they have an artistic like view, they
right,
should whether I like it or not, they should go through with if their viewpoint is that they don't want a game to have easy, then don't do it. But don't expect me to
right.
like the maybe people like minded like me. Don't expect us to like get into all of your games. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's my thing. Like, games are not meant for everybody. I think there's been this push over the past few years that all games should be accessible to everybody. I think there is one thing if you're thinking about, like, disability accessibility, then yes, I think you should try to accommodate that. But when it's just, oh, I'm not good enough at a game, I think the game should be easier, well, then I'm not sure if I quite, follow that particular motivation. I mean, some games are, catered around having multiple difficulties and letting, different people experience it different ways. But a game like this, these Souls-like games, a core of this design philosophy is to have a challenge, some level of difficulty that maybe not everybody's going to be able to, actually have the skill level to accomplish. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's okay. Like, for that core group who really enjoys to get their butt kicked while playing a game, good for them. They get to go run through and have that feeling of satisfaction that they were able to accomplish it. I mean, does like I guess it suck for those who maybe don't have that skill level or don't want to put the time in to get through something.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose, but I don't know. I don't feel like that should negate the game maker's design philosophy and making a challenging game for the core audience that wants a challenging
Yeah.
game.
Something that really came to my mind at least when I was playing it, kind of harking back to the like you said, the philosophy of the game kind of beating you down and death being a big part of it was I don't know, the game type and game style really reminded me of a game that we've loved. Maybe my favorite game in the last 10 years was a game like Hades, and those roguelike type games where like I really enjoyed Hades because of yes, it was a game that was emphasized, death and all and multiple runs and like death really kind of hitting you hard, but Hades, for me at least, whenever death would occur, it at least rewarded you. Like I remember, you would get like rewards. You would make progress. You would get resources, other things
Yeah,
that were gained through death.
but that's not what this game is. Like they're two completely different genres. Like okay, yes, you die a lot, but
I'm just
the
comparing
reason
them.
for
Yeah.
dying, I think it's a tricky thing to compare though, because Hades. Okay, so death is expected on both of these, but
Mm-hmm.
in Hades, death is a form of progression. That's the whole point of a roguelike kind of genre is you die, you improve, you move on. Souls-like games are, at least to my understanding, once again, I have not played any of them by any means in detail, but yes, you die, but it's not about, gaining something from death. They're not roguelikes. You don't do multiple runs of a Dark Souls. It is a run, and you just have to, you die a lot until you get good, essentially. I
Mm-hmm.
think what you gain from dying typically is knowledge. Like, you learn a boss a behavior or pattern. You just get a little bit better each time. Like, your satisfaction comes from slowly learning the boss's patterns and abilities and being able to overcome those abilities. So I mean, I get what you're saying, and granted, I love Hades. I mean, if I'm looking at these two games, it's definitely a game that personally I would take to a lot more, but I don't think that's a knock against something like Elden Ring or Dark Souls. They
Hades is a
both
true
have
10.
depth, but treat it very differently.
That's a true 10 out of 10. I said it.
Oh, yeah, no, Hades is probably like my favorite game of the past like 3 years. So, but
I would
that's
have to think
a
about it, but
conversation.
it it might be my favorite game in the last decade. But we won't. I won't go too far on Hades.
Yeah, no, it's up there. that could be another conversation one day. But I don't know. I guess my thing is, even though I haven't played it, I haven't gone through the frustrations you have. Maybe I'd feel a little different. I was one get my butt whooped, but I think it's okay. This game is hard. I think the bigger
Mm-hmm.
pushback it's getting now is you're right. A lot of reviewers were definitely very passionate about this game. They probably were fans of the series, so they were excited to play it, rated it very highly, and
Speaking of,
in
let me
their
switch over.
experience, they
Okay,
were,
go on.
clouding this as a more accessible game. I think people would have read into that differently.
Mm-hmm.
I think what would have alleviated a lot of this, and something I really missed from like a few generations past, if there was just like a demo for this game, like a 2 hour demo you can download on Steam or Xbox or wherever, play up till that big, bridge boss that got your butt whooped,
Mm-hmm.
and then make your decision there. You would know pretty quickly if this game's for you. And I mean, few games do that, unfortunately. I mean, Nintendo still puts out some demos for stuff. They just put out that Kirby demo recently, and people are jumping into that. But I wish that was a trend that would start coming back. Give people a chance to experience the game, at least a taste of it, and decide if it's for them or not. Then, if they don't like a review score, it's whatever. It's just a review. They get to experience it
Mm-hmm.
for themselves.
Well, speaking of review scores, I mean, I guess we can go ahead and dig just a tiny bit on it. But I kind of pulled up just a few things I want to talk about with some of the scoring. I mean, at least we're on at least Metacritic. So the PC Elden Ring score, though this one is the one that might be slightly altered because PC, from what I understand, had some major problems upon release. As far as I know, I think shoot, I forgot the name of the company. Oh, From Software. From what I understand, I think From Software has already said they will be releasing patches soon. So I figured we wouldn't go, too specific into what the problems were. But yeah, so I mean, it had problems, and as you can tell, this is probably the one that's been affected the most. With the user score, this one's been pretty bombed, I would say, with a 6.2 versus a 94 with the Metascore.
Yeah, it was like a 97 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, pretty unfortunate, right? I mean, nobody likes bombing review scores, at least with the users.
Is that the primary reason that is being bombed is because of performance issues, or is it because I know the big pushback I've seen beyond just the performance stuff
Hmm.
is people don't agree this should have been the 10 out of 10 game that they were all, advertised as, and they're just all mad that they wasted money on a game that they're not enjoying. Is I didn't read the user scores, so I don't know if
It
you
could
actually
be.
looked
I
at
mean, I
one.
haven't actually looked at them. I mean, we can go ahead and take a peek. Just look look at the negatives.
Yeah, so
So
they're
this
talking about
one,
performance. Yeah.
so this one's actually talking about. I don't want. I can expand that. Oh, I'm not going to read all that. So that one seems like a legitimate problem with the actual game. This one's more performance. This one seems to be fixed. So this is yeah. So that's more of PC version. Okay, so it seems like the majority of the scores that are bad here are bombing because of the performance.
Yeah, it's really hard to say because I mean, I'm curious what the performance hits really stemmed from. Because I mean, I watched a few reviews when Elden Ring right before it came out for the day one patch. Like we watched was it Skill Ups and a few
I
others.
believe, from what I understand, it's a lot of frame rate problems. At least,
But
I even
I
heard
guess
the
I'm
Series
curious.
X has the same thing to an extent.
Right. Well, I guess my point is I'm curious where they're stemming from because I mean this is the
Oh,
PC review, and we were I know in the Skill Up video they were talking about where he was saying his performance was excellent.
oh.
So I'm curious if it was just maybe his rig was working out well for him, or if the day one patch made some issues. And that's a tricky thing. Like I agree that if a game comes out in a really poor performance state, that should hinder it from getting that perfect score. But at the same time, like games are always going to have performance issues. Like games are huge, complicated pieces of software. They're going to have issues to some level. So how much do you take off a score for those potential, performance hits or, frame rate issues, whatever it may be,
Hmm.
especially things that will probably be corrected pretty soon. Like I'm going to wager, especially if there are other people who do have good performance, that it's just a matter of time before From Software kind of figures out what these issues are, updates them, fixes them, and then it works well for everybody. So should the game be permanently dinged because they had some issues at the beginning, maybe from a bad patch, or I don't know. Like if this was like a Cyberpunk issue where like the entire game was broken, that's a different story. This seems like a game that just, they're encountering some issues. Maybe it's in a worse state than they anticipated for
It'll
whatever
go up
reason,
over
but
time, but yeah, maybe initially their sales would be dinged, like you said, dinged a little bit from it.
yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just getting like a user score like that. Like, I think it's pretty crappy that people are bombing it. Like, give me it zeros. It's
Yeah, that's
clearly not
not
a game
fair.
that's a zero. Um, I mean, granted, I mean the critic scores are definitely keeping it up there, but I don't know. People seem to really harp on, especially like performance issues, and I can understand if you just invested, $60 in a game, you've been excited to play it, and then it performs crap for you. That's definitely going to, hit you where it hurts. But
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm also not a big fan of review bombing in general because there are people who work hard on these games, and unless the game is legitimately a bad game, which by all intent accounts, from what I can tell, Elden Ring is not that. And even if you don't think it's the best game in the world, it is most definitely, or seems like a solid game for most people. So I don't know. I think that user score bombing is pretty unfortunate in this
Hmm.
situation.
So back to it, I guess we'll just take a peek. The Series X scores are slightly higher, so a 6.9 and a 96. Once again, I feel like these are fairly low as well because from what I understand, Elden Ring was having some frame rate issues on Series
Mhm.
X. Granted, I don't think the discourse around this is anywhere near as bad as the PC version. By far, the highest rated is PS5. So PS5 definitely seems to maybe have the least amount of issues. I'm not sure, but yeah, 7.7. That's decent.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as I said, it seems like it's either people who are, unhappy that they bought a game that they're, not enjoying because it's harder than they thought, or it's people who just have poor performance. Which, don't get me wrong, valid criticisms. I'm not gonna say you're wrong for, not enjoying a game because you're having bad performance with it. That's completely fair. But I don't know. I don't think that should overly hinder the score of the game if we're looking at it that way. I mean, I don't know. It depends. I'm trying to have a good way to frame this. I just keep coming back to Cyberpunk. Like a game like that that's clearly broken. Yeah, I think you should be able to bomb that to your heart's content because clearly there was some shadiness going on there. The performance issues were more than just, frame rate drops. That game
Mm-hmm.
was just straight up not what they advertised. It doesn't seem that's the case for Elden Ring. Like for the most part, this is a solid game that is, unfortunately having some performance hits right now, but I think those are all things that will probably be resolved relatively soon. Granted, I might be eating my words if, it's in this state in like 2 or 3 months out and people are still having crappy issues with it, then
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole nother story, but I don't know.
So, something else I did want to bring up is a lot of the people. I mean, I guess more particularly like people at IGN and some other YouTubers I notice. A lot of the same people that really like this game. I put this in the notes, but all of this very much reminds me of like a lot of the kind of dialogue or discourse that was happening. Remember back in the day with Resident Evil. It very much reminds me of Resident Evil, where like those games were kind of obtuse and very and kind of hard to play simply because of gameplay and kind of how puzzles and all of that stuff worked. Nothing was really explained. It was more like you kind of had to figure things out. But again, just in my opinion, it was a very get good mentality, kind of hard to approach and understand, and like it wasn't necessarily a game that people would call was for filthy casuals. Even though now Resident Evil, everyone plays Resident Evil, but I just feel like this conversation kind of reminds me of those early Resident Evil games, like maybe 1 through 3, because I remember like Resident Evil was not like it was always a name, but it felt like it was in a much smaller community back then. You know what I mean? Now
Are you talking
it's
about like RE1 times, like
yeah,
back in the?
RE1, 2, like those early games.
Well, that was also such a different age, man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think people they go back and they play a game like that now with, the benefit of playing decades of modern gaming, especially gaming nowadays that holds your hand and shows you every single little thing. That you go back to a game in the early '90s when a bunch of these systems weren't even created yet for, training the player to do certain things, and they're like, oh, well, this game's just too obtuse or it didn't teach me something, but that's how most games were back
And maybe
then.
they could
Like,
have an excuse because there was no internet. There's no easy way of
I
figuring
think
things out.
it was a, just kind of a characteristic of the time of gaming back then. Like, and maybe it was even a conscious design decision. Like, I don't know what was going through the designer's head, but I mean, there is definitely, I think, for a, survival horror game like that, making you feel uncomfortable and
Mm-hmm.
unsure of yourself. I mean, that could have been something they, explicitly chose to make the player feel. I don't know, but at the same time, I would imagine it's also just a sign of the times and the technology and just even kind of the type of games and styles are being made back
Mm-hmm.
then, they didn't incorporate the big hand-holdy stuff that we see
A
nowadays.
game
So,
like Tomb Raider kind of sounds like that too, though. The original Tomb Raider, I remember, was like
Man, a
impossible
lot
to
of games
figure
were
out what
like
the heck
that
you were
back in the
doing.
90s.
Yeah.
Especially like those PlayStation, like even some of the RPGs and action games. Like, if you didn't have a guide, good luck figuring stuff out. You'd have to spend hours looking at every nook and cranny. But at the same time, that was kind of the fun of it. I do feel like to a certain extent, that kind of exploration has been lost in modern games. Like, you could argue that maybe it was too obtuse back then, but at the same time, when you figured out how to do something or you found something to help you progress in the game, it was exciting. Like, you felt really good to have, discovered that on your own and made progress on your own.
Hmm.
And nowadays, you don't always have that. And, games, you have markers all over the place. They tell you every single thing you have to do. Look at something like Arceus, right? You complained ad nauseum just how slow and tedious the beginning of the game was because they wanted to show you every single little thing. And, like, I think it would have been okay if they just didn't tell you some of that stuff and let you figure out a few
That
things on
game's
your
actually a
own.
great compare and contrast to Elden Ring, where this game kind of doesn't really do much to show you that, but Arceus was just, like you said, like an hour and a half's worth of this is how you do
And to
this.
be fair, I mean, I think it depends on what kind of gamer you are and what you want out of it. And this is where I'm ultimately kind of coming back to with this whole Elden Ring thing. Like, people are upset about the difficulty and obtuseness and whatever, but this game just might not be for you. And that's totally okay. I can
No,
understand
it's
feeling a
fine.
little disappointed because you might want to experience the game
I'm not
somehow,
even looking
but
for a refund. I'm whatever,
it's just, I
Well,
mean, that's all media though. Like, there are certain movies that I might want to, watch. Like, okay, so like for me, it's like horror movies, right? I
hmm.
enjoy horror movies as a concept. Like, I enjoy still like the thriller stories, but man, I don't like watching certain horror movies. It's not my thing. And I feel like it's a similar thing here. Like, this gameplay may not be for me. Yes, I might be intrigued to, know the story and maybe the environment. I'm missing out on that, but at the same time, the rest of this game just isn't my bag. There's 1,000 other games out there that are.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I can understand people wanting to be upset and enjoy what everybody else is
Oh
enjoying,
no, I
but
hope
I
people
think
are enjoying it. Yeah, I don't have any problems with
it's
it.
okay for a game not to be for everybody.
Hmm.
I don't think that necessarily means it shouldn't be a 10 out of 10 or it should be a 10 out of 10. We can talk about that in a different kind of discussion, but I don't know. Let the game be what it is. For those who enjoy this style of game, which clearly there are a lot of people who do, they're gonna have a great time with it. And
And
I think that's great. They should.
and I've been like, I don't know, like I'm not often swayed by like review scores and discourse and like dialogue and communities over games, but there's other games that have suckered me in to playing them, and I was just like, I don't get it. Like, remember, I don't know if you remember Gone Home. Gone Home was a game
Mm.
with a lot of people talking about it. I played it and was thoroughly unimpressed. I mean, I played oh, what's that one game? Oh man, it's gonna kill me until I remember the name of it.
Oh, you're talking about Outer Wilds. I know we've had this conversation.
Outer Wilds was one, but there was another game. It was oh, it was a game. Oh man, I'm not gonna even try. But yeah, there's multiple games that are very much like that, and before.
Yeah, and that is fine. I mean, that shouldn't, I think, ding the game from a quality standpoint. Like, uh, I think that's, you'll probably mention this, I know we'll talk about review scores in a little bit, but that's why I think it typically is a good thing if somebody who enjoys a certain style or genre of game is the one who actually is reviewing said game. No, there can be some biases there at the same time, but I want to know what somebody's opinion is who enjoys that game and what they think about it. If you get somebody who's just, that game is not for them, they're going to bash the game, and it has nothing to do with the quality of the game. It's just that's not for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's as if if it's as if you gave me Mass Effect 2 to review. I mean, what kind of score do you think I would give it?
Oh,
Yeah.
one, that game's the worst.
Uh,
I'm kidding.
no, two of the greatest games ever. Okay, so before we've kind of gone on pretty good for this one, but before we continue, I guess we kind of got into some of my problems and negatives, but I did want to point out a couple things I actually really enjoyed about Elden Ring. Just a few basic things. I really enjoyed the variety of character bases and options with the character creator. I thought it was pretty robust and detailed, and I don't know if you got to saw, but people online had showed that someone created Kanye West.
Oh no.
Pretty realistic one. But yeah, like you can create basically, whatever person you'd like to create. Other things, I really loved the opening cinematic and the overall plot. For me, it felt very Lord of the Ringsy. Felt like it did a great job kind of creating intrigue and making you kind of wonder where this queen had gone and what exactly the Elden Ring was and what it could do. And maybe the third thing that stuck out to me majorly was Just kind of the world and the music, like the atmosphere and environments are pretty beautiful. Like those are the big things that make me want to go back and play the game again, give it one more shot. Is to kind of, maybe I'll kind of leave that boss and just kind of go adventure and lose myself, you know, because like I felt like the graphics in the game looked beautiful and the music is really loud and thumping and I don't know. But yeah, those are kind of just a couple things that I really liked and were impressed. Anything I kind of mentioned that may have swayed you, or did it change your thoughts at all about this game?
If anything, I want to play it more now. I tell
Really?
you, I have this funny kind of reaction when I watch you play a game, especially if it's a game you hate.
Do you want to borrow my
Somehow,
copy?
well, I don't know, maybe, but I guess my point is like this happened to me with like when you were playing Arceus for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
You were just beaten down on that game, but something about the reason, because you hated it so much, I wanted to play it and figure out. I don't know what you were wrong with. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I want to figure out why you were wrong in the whole thing.
Well, I'm
So I kind of have that feeling now.
well, I'm willing to give Elden Ring a chance. I feel like tomorrow night I'm gonna, well, maybe not tomorrow night 'cause I have to put out the podcast. But I think Saturday night I am gonna do one long stream. I'll give it one more like 3-4 hours, and you know if nothing settles in, I have no problem kind of being done with it. So after Saturday's done, if you want, you can borrow my I have a Series
Oh,
X copy, and you can get to.
I'm good right now.
Well, I still got your
Don't
Mass
have time.
Effect anyway, so whatever.
I know you do. I haven't forgotten.